Good evening to Europe, good morning to Asia, and good afternoon to those all across the fruited plains. You're now locked into the worldwide 20 megabit beacon of truth, hope, and justice, otherwise known as your weekly dose of the Crimson Pill. I, your host, the great and all-powerful Antonin Feori. Just make sure you don't peek behind the curtain, folks. Encourage you to unfasten your seatbelts and turn on all portable electronic devices as we embark on the next voyage of the USS Crimson Pill. Our course has been charted for the Isle of Light by way of the Straits of Knowledge and the Sea of Tranquility. In the event of turbulence, the captain reminds you that your seat cushion is no substitute for an open mind. If you're seated in an exit row, you are now invited to move forward to our first-class cabin of truth at any time. Ladies and gentlemen of the listening audience, welcome to the Crimson Pill.
And ladies and gentlemen of the bbsradio.com listening audience, welcome to this Sunday, July 10th, 2011 edition and dose of the Crimson Pill. I'm your host, Antonin Feori, and I am tentatively giving a title to today's show, NASA's Cover-Ups, Ellenin's Friends, and the Truth About What's Heading Our Way. Now, one of the elements I had hoped to cover in today's program is a bit of research that your humble host has been conducting over the course of about the last year and a half, working on a book and working at getting this encapsulated, summarized into a presentation of sorts to make, and I'm calling that The Curious Case of Smedley Butler. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with the name or the case of Smedley Butler, he is, at the time of his retirement from the Marine Corps, he was a major general, and he was the most highly decorated Marine in U.S. history. Arguably, he may still be, if not the most highly decorated Marine, then certainly among the top few in the history of our military service. The case of Smedley Butler comes to mind to your humble host to share with you today because it is an exemplifier of the significance, the impact, and really the tragedy, folks, of the compartmentalization of information that we suffer under in this country today. What we think of as the United States, which should be the most democratic, the most open, the most transparent of governmental operations, is actually quite the opposite, and it's among the most secretive in the nation, or excuse me, in the world's community of nations. The power, folks, of classified and compartmentalized information is how we must start today's discourse in the program. Your host is actually going to take you back in time to some of the topics that we've covered in past programs and that are very important and actually of keen interest to much of our listening audience. Today we'll be talking about Comet Elenin. And not just Comet Elenin, or Elenin, tomato, folks, your host calls it Elenin. We won't only be talking about what some folks consider a comet, but really, is it a comet, Elenin? But what might be more disturbing, alarming, perhaps, and of interest to us are the friends that Elenin appears to be bringing along with as it makes its way into the neighborhood of our earthly realm. We will talk about Comet Elenin and Elenin's friends. We will talk about secrecy, NASA's cover-ups. We will talk about recent announcements and disclosures that NASA has been making, not only with regard to Elenin, but with regard to extraterrestrial life, with regard to informational disclosures based upon their findings and their research that drastically redefine what you and I had been taught for years and years. Well, really, it wasn't true teaching, folks, because they've actually held the true knowledge, the true understanding of these things. It's merely that us, the public, John Q. Public, you and I, after all, we're so unimportant as to receive these mere scraps from the table of knowledge and understanding and truth. We're so unimportant because all we do are pay the bills for their research, for their toys that they use in their findings, and as well as paying their salaries. That's all we do, folks. We're completely unimportant. We're too ignorant and we're too ill-prepared to handle the truth. Or are we? No, we're not. That's not my opinion, and it's why we have today's show available. Also on today's program, for the first time in Crimson Pill history on bbsradio.com, We will open the phone lines to take your calls. I'm most eager, most anxious to touch base with the bbsradio.com and Crimson Pill listening audience. If you have been along for the ride over the course of the last month and plus, you've heard on our multiple episodes that we've had featured guests, including eminent researchers, incredibly respected in their fields of pursuit, folks like Mr. Jordan Maxwell, Dr. Brooks Agnew, Dr. Stanley Monteith, Dr. Joseph P. Farrell. And in the course of those discussions, we've had so much real estate to try to cover in terms of trying to get down to what the real truth is and why it's been hidden from us, once again, those that only receive the scraps from the table, despite the fact that we're the ones that are paying all the bills and paying all those salaries, and we're getting no appreciation, no thanks, and in particular no respect as a result of us making our commitment in that regard. Well, how do we begin this expose? Yes, we will get to NASA, we will get to Ellen, and we will get to more of NASA's cover-ups and meta-disclosures. But I want to start by setting the table just to help some of you really understand the magnitude, the scope, the scale of how these cover-ups take place. Because, yes, I hear in the mind's eye cognitive dissonance ringing in the ears of many of our listeners, folks who would prefer to believe that our government has nothing but our best interests at heart. Ladies and gentlemen, your host would prefer to believe that as well, and in fact spent the first X number of years of the host's life believing precisely that we live under this bastion of truth and hope and liberty that we call the red, white, and blue, that we're all in this together, that we're the best example of democracy ever known or seen on the face of the earth. Unfortunately, that's not true. Yes, this nation was set forth on the right path. Yes, our Constitution is the best example of what liberty can mean in the face of tyranny. But folks, in recorded human history, the pattern that we can receive and read and know to be the case is that tyranny is quite astute at rising and rising again, reconsolidating its power, attempting to re-subjugate the citizens or the people in general to that tyrannical authority, and it has happened here in our own United States of America. How do I know this? Well, let's return to the curious case of Smedley Butler.